In this lesson, we will combine everything that we have learned about CSS so far and use it in a real-world application. So this means there are no new topics in this lesson for you to wrap your mind around. Instead, we're going to work together to style this example web page to look something like this. I think we can all agree that this page looks better than this. Now, you already have all of the tools and knowledge necessary to do this. We're going to write all of the code together as a team, so let's get started. The first thing that we will do is assign a different background color to the overall page. So instead of white, let's choose a green color. I'm using Adobe Photoshop's color picker. If you don't have Photoshop, that's okay. Simply perform a web search for HTML color picker. So I've chosen this shade of green. So I will copy and paste this 6-character hexadecimal color code. And in our CSS, I will target the HTML element. That is the ultimate container of our entire page. It's one level up even from the body tag. So we're selecting HTML and then we'll just assign it a background color. So this is your first time in the course seeing hexadecimal color codes. Usually, we've been typing in simple keywords for colors. So when you have a hexadecimal color code, it's 6 characters long and you include a pound symbol before it. It's that simple. So this character code represents a very specific, unique shade of green. So if I save and refresh, we can see that it's been applied. Next, let's give the container for our website's content a background color of white. So you will remember that in the HTML, all of our content lives within a div with a class of container. So in our CSS, we already have a rule for container. Simply say background color. I'll use the hexadecimal color code for white, which is 6 Fs, but you can shorten it to just 3 Fs. So if we save and refresh, we can see that that's taken place. Next, let's add padding on the left and right of our container so that the content doesn't sit right up against the edge. Container, padding left, we'll say 40 pixels. Padding right, 40 pixels. That looks excellent, however, it changed the overall width of the container. So now, instead of having a width of 940, our container is over 1,000 pixels wide. So you'll remember from an earlier lesson, we can simply say box sizing border box, and then the padding will remain, but it doesn't change the overall calculated width of the element. So this looks good. However, by adding padding to the container element, that reduced the available space for our columns, so we can see that they no longer fit side by side. So we need to adjust their width values. Instead of using pixels, we'll use percentages. The main column will be 66% of the available width, and the sidebar will take up 34%. So we can see that our columns are in place once again. Next, let's add a bit of space between the main column and the sidebar. We just added 40 pixels of padding to the container here, so I think 40 pixels between the two columns would look good. So in our code, I will target the main column, and I will give it a bit of padding right, 40 pixels. Now if we save, this will break the layout because the main column is now trying to take up 66% of the width and add 40 pixels of padding on the right. So we remember that in order to stop the padding from adding to the overall calculated width, we can say box sizing, border box. Excellent. Now just a quick detail, I noticed that there's more text in the sidebar than the main area, which is completely backwards. So let's fix that very quickly. So I'll paste in a bit of new text into the main column and paste in a bit of new text for the sidebar. And that looks much better. Next, I think I'll change the font for the overall page. So to do that, we'll target the body element and we'll use the font family property. I'll use a font named Tahoma, and if someone's device doesn't have that font installed, we will fall back to use any sans serif font. Now don't worry too much about this line. We will cover CSS typography in an entire detailed lesson later on in the course. But for now, this should do the trick. So we can see that that changed the font, but the font overall looks a bit too large now. So I will include another property targeting the body element, font size we'll bring it down to 87% overall. That looks much better. That was a great example of how powerful the cascade and inheritance are. By simply targeting the one body element, these font properties are inherited and are cascaded down to the entire page. Next, let's adjust the spacing in the header. I think there should be less space between this line, and there should be more space above the first line. First, we'll address the space between the two lines. To do that, we'll create a new rule in our CSS file. We'll target the heading level 1 element within the header and remove the margin. And then we'll also select the paragraph element in the header and remove its margin as well. Now, let's add a bit of space above the main title. To do that, we'll simply target the header itself and say padding top, 20 pixels. Let's also add a bit of space on the bottom. So the spacing of the header looks a lot better now. Next, let's adjust the color of the text in the header. So let's choose a slightly darker green shade. So I'm picking a darker color, and you can see the hexadecimal color code is different now. So we'll say all elements that live inside the header element, so all of this content, should have a color of this shade of green. That looks nice. Let's make this heading level 1 element not be bold. Here's the rule for that. Font weight, normal. And also let's actually give it a smaller font size as well. That looks a lot better. Next, let's choose a better color or a more subtle color for these border lines. Hop over to our color picker, and I want to choose a very light green. How about that? So we'll copy that color code. We'll find the content area that has the top and bottom borders. And instead of black, we'll paste in our color code. That looks much better. Next, let's give this sidebar area a background color that matches these new subtle borders. So we'll find the rule for our sidebar. Here it is. Background color. Paste in the light green. Okay, we can see that we need a bit of padding on this so that the text doesn't sit right up against the edges. Padding left, 40 pixels. Padding right, 40 pixels. And we can see that once again, by adding horizontal padding, we've broken the layout because the sidebar is now trying to use up 34% of the width plus this extra room for padding. So we know to fix that, box sizing border box. Much better. Let's go ahead and make the sidebar use a slightly smaller font size than the main column. Sidebar, font size, we'll go with 85%. That looks great. Next, let's give the footer a bit of attention. So I think this would look better if it was horizontally centered. So I'll target the footer in the style sheet, text align, center. Much better. Now because this is footer text, we don't want to draw the human eye to it. So let's make it a bit smaller and also use a color that's more subtle. So font size, 85%, and color, I'll go with a lighter gray, 999. That looks great. Let's add a bit of space below the footer. Padding bottom, 20 pixels, and we'll also give an extra bit of space on top. So padding top, 20 pixels. That looks much better. Our layout is almost complete. Let's make a few minor adjustments. I think the sidebar would look better if it had a bit of vertical padding above and below the text. So we'll find the sidebar. We will add a few new declarations. Padding top, 20 pixels, padding bottom, 20 pixels. I think that looks a lot better. Now I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't show you a quick tip to write cleaner code. So you can see that we have 4 declarations just to control padding on this one element. Now there's something named CSS shorthand which will allow us to write much cleaner code. So all we wanted is 40 pixels of padding horizontally and 20 pixels of padding vertically. So we can say padding and then we can include 4 values. So the top value comes first. It goes in a clockwise fashion. So if you think of a clock moving its hand around, so we start at the top, 20, then on the right, we want 40 pixels, then on the bottom, we want 20, and then on the left, we want 40. So if we save, you can see nothing changes. It's the exact same as if we still had 4 different declarations for padding top, padding right, padding bottom. Now, with CSS shorthand, for padding, we can take this even a step further. Instead of having all 4 values in a clockwise fashion, we can simply include 1 value for vertical, up and down, and 1 value for horizontal. So this will achieve the same thing as well. So that's your first taste of CSS shorthand. We will be finding out that there is different shorthand for different properties throughout the remainder of this course, and it will allow you to write much cleaner, more succinct code. Now that's going to bring this lesson to a close. I will mention that I'm aware this layout looks a bit dated. So this does not look like the most modern, beautifully, visually pleasing website. But you need to walk before you can run. So in future lessons, we will be learning how to create more modern, flexible looking layouts. But I think this was a good first step and a good exercise in combining all of your existing knowledge and applying it to a real example. Just a quick heads up that if you have a spare moment or two, I would really appreciate it if you could go and rate and review this course. I hope you're enjoying the course and finding it helpful, but even if you're not, above all else, an honest review is the best review. And I would love for prospective students to be able to see honest impressions of the course. I'll see you in the next lesson.